we're going live, and we should be live now. I'm just waiting for my secondary screen to catch up. I should probably play an intro video, but I don't have one. That would probably help. I know Clint has a really good... Okay, yes, we are live. Hey, what's going on, everybody? We'll give it some time, like a couple minutes until some more people roll in. But gang, if you saw in the video description, I'm joined here today by two of my good friends, Kermit and Rob Jones. They are two excellent young researchers in this subject. A lot of the time when you hear about up-and-comers studying this topic, they're some older folks, and they might be a little jaded to the topic, or people might be a bit jaded towards them. But Mr. Kermit here is a licensed CPA. His angle to this subject is financial analysis of legacy programs. He's smart as a tack. This man helped me out back in the day with the Off-World Technologies Project. A brilliant dude. And Rob Jones here. Rob, you were a former nuclear propulsion engineer in the Navy, yeah?
Mm-hmm. That is correct, yeah. I was a machinist mate second class on the... Well, I don't want to say. Never mind. I shouldn't have said that.
Well... Then I'll change the topic. In a couple weeks here, Rob has a publication coming out. I'm going to be referencing it in an upcoming video of mine because it's truly excellent. It brings the receipts everywhere. So please keep an eye out for that. These are two good friends of the channel and two good friends in real life. So just a little history with these guys. We've all known each other for quite a bit over a year now. Kermit and I, you guys probably remember him from the November 2024 hearings. We did a live stream and we attended together. Unfortunately for that hearing, Kermit was stuck in the overflow room. And we'll talk a little bit about the line and stuff today. And then we all met again November 2024 at Seoul. And Rob Jones here is remembered as the man who asked the best questions during Seoul. Kermit, am I in the ballpark by saying that?
Oh yeah.
So yeah, so Kermit and Rob joined me for the hearings. These gentlemen got in, which is great. They didn't cut anybody in line. Originally, they were going to come as media members, but what was a bit strange is the House Oversight Committee, the radio spokesperson, denied almost everybody that wasn't a House accredited media person. And this was a little different to November of last year because kind of podcasts and anybody could get in. So instead of media, they got in on a reservation, and I had gotten into the hearing by a reservation by somebody kind of connected with setting up the hearing and so forth. So why don't we take like a minute and a half, and Kerm, why don't you tell us about your interest in the subject, Rob, and then you, and then we'll just start getting into the hearing.
Well, yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, as you said, I'm interested in this stuff because it's super fascinating. How can you not be interested in this stuff? I mean, I grew up off of, science fiction. Star Wars is like my favorite show growing up. I really started getting seriously interested in this topic when I saw the 60 Minutes documentary.
Maybe his ad blocker just went off.
Nope, Fed's got him.
No, there he is.
There we go. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened there. I don't know what happened there.
Just keep talking. No problem.
Okay, my bad. So so I got interested in this stuff when the 60 Minutes documentary came out featuring Elizondo, Graves, Fravor, Alex Dietrich, and also Marco Rubio. Mm-hmm. And that video and that whole documentary was like, there's a serious inquiry going on into this, and then also kind of the hype train before the DNI's preliminary assessment, June 25th, 2021. So I've been kind of covering this kind of since then, which it really kind of ramped up for me and like my personal interest when Grush came forward, specifically, his testimony around, unacknowledged crash retrieval program, reverse engineering, and also aerospace corporations being involved. That was kind of the thing in my brain that kind of was like, okay, I want to look into this. And, as you said, I'm a CPA. I audit corporations for a living. That's part of my job. So I'm familiar with things like SEC filings, private statements, proxies. So started looking at those filings, just trying to understand, how does Lockheed Martin disclose their operations? How do they signal to their investors, like, hey, this is what we're doing? And then also, what laws are on the books, so to speak, to allow companies like Lockheed Martin to, let's say, be a part of a UFO program. And kind of basically in my research, I kind of discovered that there has been a long tradition of laws on the books and also exemptions provided to these companies to specifically do this type of work. I mean, it's not stated UFO or reverse engineering, but there are specific exemptions which allow for not just information related to programs, but also financial data to be withheld and not disclosed on financial filings and within agencies as well. So it's kind of government side, corporate side. It's interesting. Very much am a fan of Catherine Austin Fitz and Richard Dolan's work on this subject, and specifically the financial estimate of the situation, if you will. Happy to talk about my thoughts on that later. So yeah, I think this is, I think it's an insane story. It's fascinating. And also there's something going on here. Where there's smoke, there's fire. So, and I'm blessed to be best friends with you two. And just rolling in DC was a time and a half. So it was a great time.
Rob, let everybody know a little bit more about you two. I know a lot of people are interested in you too from the Wednesday on the night shift. We were hanging out with Clint, Xander, and those, and you spent some time with them, and everybody was swooning after you.
Yeah. I guess. I mean, I don't know what's so good about me. I used to be I was a naval nuclear propulsion engineer for quite a while. I was a carrier guy, not a submarine guy, so didn't really see anything crazy, no experiences there or anything of that nature, but a lot of experience, learning physics, fluid flow and heat transfer, things of that nature. I didn't learn how to speak correctly there. I learned that in theater school. Flunked out of school a bunch of times after the military because I just couldn't decide what it is that I actually wanted to study. Not for, lack of brains, but just I'm not good at school. I'm not one of those people. At some point, I never really got into the UFO thing until relatively recently. It's not really my jam, or at least that's what I kept telling myself. Not super interested in the paranormal or anything like that. Ghosts are fake. These were all things that I thought back then, right? And then my brother was very, very into this. I had a younger brother who was about 10 years younger than me, and he passed away about 2 years ago, about a month before David Grush gave testimony. And, I was a bit reeling from that and had a really hard time with his loss, and started to look into like some of the things, just out of love for my brother and just nostalgia for him. I started looking into things that he was interested in, and this happened to be one of them. And the first month or so, I really kind of thought this was bullshit. And I'm like, damn, Joe, you were fucking up. But as it just so turns out, David Grush gave testimony before Congress, along with Commander David Fravor, as well as, pardon me, I can't even speak, I'm a little choked up there, but there's a lot of testimony given there. And when that happened, it all sort of clicked for me. I realized, oh, wow, this is actually real. There are things that I could look into that are not just Rick Doty stories on the internet. So I began getting into that and starting to look into actual crash retrieval information, and got frustrated with the types of communities that I was finding. So I started messaging people that were making good videos, people like you, and bothering the hell out of you, and bothering Kermit, who was posting really good stuff on Reddit. And eventually I just sort of bothered my way into the Soul Foundation conference and a bunch of other places, and bothered my way into working on some TV projects, and bothered my way into editing my friend David Burkett's book, and bothered my way into congressional hearing. So I guess it works.
Yeah, it does. You didn't bother your way in. Both of you guys were key personnel, especially compared to some of the other folks there. And as we start talking about the hearings, if people have good questions like this, because this is a great question we should absolutely dive into, maybe even now before we get into anything else. If you got a good question about the hearing or anything, if it's addressed to somebody specific, put our name and then put it in all caps just so we can look out for it in the feed. But this is already a good question to dive into before we even kind of step back about the lines and kind of the drama around even getting into the hearing. But yeah, so probably one of the biggest takeaways from the hearing, besides the Hellfire video, is all of the slander, rightfully so, against Sean Kirkpatrick. He was talked about a ton by Luna and also by George Knapp. In the now probably viral in this community statement, Luna says, "We'd be happy to get a subpoena to Kirkpatrick." I think we all, and I want to hear what you guys think, talked about this a little bit and kind of agree on the same page. But A, no, Kirkpatrick does not have to adhere to such a subpoena. And B, perhaps it is not such a wise idea to give advanced warning to a potential hostile, not potential, definitely hostile witness, in order to sort themselves out legally, to get protection from those who task them with such duties under Arrow if they need and so forth. What do you guys think?
Rob, do you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, I would say you're dead on. I don't exactly call up my ops and let them know when I'm going to shoot the block up.
Yeah.
So I'm probably not going to want to tell Sean Kirkpatrick that there's a series of very pointed questions that he may want to start preparing for.
Yeah.
I would probably, in an ideal world, want to catch him unprepared at his place of work, maybe with his lawyer not there. So he's panicking when he calls his lawyer and is still being given questions under a congressional subpoenaed interrogatory. Those would be the things that I would be hoping for in that situation. Certainly not to let him know that him and his Battelle cronies can sit around with a couple lawyers in a room for a few months figuring out what they're going to say before they ever say it.
Yeah, especially if Kirkpatrick is still active, or maybe he got rewarded for his Arrow work. Because, of course, once he ran away from Arrow in December 2023, he went on to serve as a senior position at Oak Ridge, ORNL, which is a Tennessee-based FFRDC that, of course, I've heard some rumors that that location actually houses specific craft. And then his LLC, Nonlinear Solutions, as of 2025, began subcontracts with MITRE for U.S. Spacecom. So who knows what sort of rewards he's getting there. But, Kerm, what do you think?
I mean, I think a lot about Lakatsky and James Lakatsky and what he said specifically to Knapp and Corbell. He was like, look, if I get called up in front of Congress, I will lie to Congress. So and he also says in his book, like, we cut open a craft and we were able to access the interior. And that was a whole, revelation from that podcast. Mm-hmm. So if these folks on the inside are willing to lie and they've already been open about lying about it. I mean, Lakatsky was someone that was connected with OSAP, which is a, congressionally mandated program under the, support of Harry Reid, but if Lakatsky's saying that, I can only imagine that other people connected to the program would. And maybe Kirkpatrick is, but if it's there, then they're probably going to lie about it. And they're going to drag their feet so hard to make sure that they never get up to the podium because they don't want to do it.
Or plead the fifth, or approach
yeah.
with a legal team. We've also seen difficulties now with, I think it was Burleson who talked about Stafford level personnel blocking various lines of questioning and so forth. I think you could likely extend that to the idea of interrogatories making their way to various people. I think Luna kind of wanted to play up the Kirkpatrick stuff for fun and to get the crowd riled up because everybody kind of clapped during that moment. I mean, I was kind of engaged in it. I'm sure you guys were too. It was a lot of fun, but you need to actually get hostile witnesses to talk. In my opinion, you got to be pretty shrewd. And I don't necessarily know if Kirkpatrick's the right guy to go to right now in a first wave of interrogatories, interrogations, whatever you want to call it. It might be a worthier pursuit to take some precautions and try and get mid-level witnesses to trade up information about superiors they're working under. But that's just my 2 cents there. Let's this is Wag Boss. Hey Wag. He wants to thank
What's
you.
What's up, Wag?
He wants to say hi to Rob.
Yeah, that's our boy Wag Boss. He was with us at SCU down in Huntsville earlier this year. Great guy. We hung out a lot. That's my boy. Thanks, dude.
And so already there's some questions. Remember, guys, put them in caps. Nick, thank you very much. This is also a great one to dive into, and we'll probably circle back to this. Nick says, Dylan Borland described the triangle craft having a fluid iridescence. Is there a precedent for fluid iridescence with triangle-shaped craft before? Yeah, there's one case, actually. Let me know if you guys remember this specific case, but it was in England in the late 80s. It was a family driving in a triangular-shaped craft with its skin looking almost like a circuit board with various pathways, had a shimmering skin. And Rob and I kind of talked about this at length, and we don't need to dive into theories, but we think that shimmering might have been some sort of signature management solution for this craft. What was your guys' takeaway from the triangle? Dive into it. Give me your thoughts on the description as well, because Borland's description is hyper interesting.
I mean, it's hard for me to take away too much from technology I don't fully understand. But what I will say is that, it meets every single measure of the observables that we've ever talked about. And of course, it has optical cloaking, it seems like, based on the description. Obvious electromagnetic effects to devices nearby, strong enough magnetic or electromagnetic fields to, cause actual biological effects. Whether or not he experienced larger or more significant biological effects is hard to say. But, as in regards to an encounter with a craft, I can't think this doesn't check. I can't think of any box that this doesn't check. You know what I mean? In terms of all of the things that we look for that corroborate with other such sightings that have been, heavily examined on this channel and others. So it was an incredibly awesome account for me, and one that really sort of fit the meta, if that makes sense to use sort of a gaming term. Like, this sort of fits like the meta of like what we're beginning to expect from that type of craft, especially given what we think about ARVs. So
yeah. And I just add, like, I was very appreciative of his account of the story. Like, he did not really speculate. He just described what he saw. And I really appreciated that. Sometimes you hear stories of like, oh, it's this thing. And, he very much was grounded in his recount of it. And it was also, it was visibly apparent that, he was very uncomfortable with, some of the parts of his testimony, recounting that story and other aspects. So massive appreciation to Borland for what he did, and describing his story as accurately and as soberly as possible. That's super helpful. And also, yeah, it's fascinating. Black Triangle. It's crazy.
So
I have a regret there.
Oh yeah, let's hear it, Rob.
I have a major regret with the hearing, and it's that we didn't stand up when we were giving a round of applause for Dylan Borland, because he deserved that. What he's been through is incredibly tough. And, I've experienced a little bit of what it's like to be on the negative side of the military when somebody doesn't like you in your command, and I can't even imagine what it's like to experience that from the top down, like the upper echelons of whatever control, whatever command structure or hierarchy that you have there. To experience that from the top down has got to be insanely horrible. So,
right. I mean,
my heart goes out to the guy.
He goes through all the right avenues. Kirkpatrick doesn't even show up to take his testimony. He goes to ICIG, and it becomes painfully clear they're just there to find out what he knows, not soberly listen and investigate his case. I can tell you guys, because I sat right behind Matthew Brown, who was sitting right behind George Knapp. And so about 5 feet in front of me to my left was Mr. Borland. And you could tell that he was extremely, extremely nervous. When he would speak, his hands were visibly shaking badly. And, I think all of us, at least Rob, you and I have talked about it. Kerm, I'd like to get your thoughts too, but definitely felt a little emotional after his testimony. I know that Dylan Borland is taken extremely seriously in some of the circles I know, and his testimony is not one to take lightly.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, something that I think is very important to express to your viewers and to anybody out there who watches this, is that when you look at whistleblowers and you look at the things, the reprisals that they experience, you need to keep in mind that these are people who, from their childhood, wanted to go do this. This has been their dream, to go do the things that they're doing now. And they are living that dream out. Whether it's the dream exactly the way they had it or the way their career is played out does not matter. They are still serving their country in the way that they were brought up to believe, and still believe to an extent is there to, to support them back, and to experience that loss of trying to do the right thing and getting screwed over for it, as if you're in the wrong, as if you're the bad guy. I can't imagine any worse feeling than that.
Yeah, especially how I know in past hearings, people have been pretty frustrated with the "I can only tell you in a skiff" type comments. But what was intriguing about Borland is taking things a step further. I can maybe tell you in a skiff. I don't know. And I need to understand if you are legally allowed to hear what I have to say. This man, same with Matt Brown as well, have the kind of impact on their lives from their whistleblowing testimonies has been painfully apparent. What was interesting to me, guys, is that so Dylan Borland had his exposure to a craft which may have been humans operating an extraterrestrial or non-human craft, or possibly an ARV that was stored in a NASA hangar at Langley Air Force Base. And then he goes on to say that he was exposed to UFO legacy programs while he was read into a multi-agency SAP. So how common are multi-agency SAPs? Because as far as I'm aware, that might be a bit of a unique scenario.
I've never heard of one.
So
simply put, I've never heard of one. And I will, for the viewers, just to lay it out there, I grew up in a SAP. Okay, my father was a contractor for a company called Allied Signal, which bought Honeywell and became Honeywell. And I basically lived in command and control Atlantic Fleet at Norfolk Naval Base for a very large portion of most of my summers on a SIPRNet computer inside of a special access project facility. I can tell you right now, I've never seen an interagency SAP, even, back then. And some of that was during the Cold War. So
let's go on to this question, and Kerm, let's start with you. Were you satisfied with the hearing? And also, maybe we've had 3 House Oversight Committee hearings thus far. Maybe you could rank them from most impactful to least impactful, in just your opinion.
I mean, yeah, I think overall, like coming out of the hearing, I think it was a very positive vibe. Me personally, I was very impressed with kind of how it went, and being on the ground, so to speak. Like I had an appreciation for kind of seeing Dave Grush there, right? Seeing him sitting behind Burleson, seeing kind of the whole team that was there. I think Nussatelli, Wiggins, Orland, Knapp, and forget his name from Pogo. Forget his name.
I'm blanking too.
Yeah, but they did a very good job. Spielberger, yeah. They did a good job, and I also think like the witness kind of pool, so to speak, it was mostly focused on like firsthand people, right? So you had Nussatelli, Air Force guy. You have active current military Chief Wiggins, who had a DOPSR approved pre-release statement. Very interesting that the Navy is like a little bit more friendly to this subject than other branches, but that's just, observation. And then Borland, right? I think for us 3, kind of the most interesting star witness. Absolutely. Because, not only did he have a craft experience and saw something at an Air Force base, but he also, in his opening statement, it said he brushed up on the crash retrieval program. So, and also, some of his statements of like, hey, can you tell us if, BAE Systems is part of that? And he's like, yeah, we're going to have to get into a skip for that conversation. We've seen this before with Grush, particularly with the more sensitive details when we're talking about things like reverse engineered craft, specific interagency SAPs, right? Things that you like, especially as a military person, it's like, this is a very odd arrangement. It's very clear that there's something going on. And I think specifically Borland did a really good job of, presenting kind of what he was exposed to and answering those questions as best he could. In terms of ranking, I would say this is, I don't know. The 2023 hearing was monumental. I would say, dare I say it? I would say this one's up there with it. The 2024 hearing, the one last year was good, but I don't know. This one was a lot more spectacle, and specifically you had the new video, right? And that got a lot of attention because it's not only like a UAP, but it's also a we're engaging with the target. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack with that hearing, where this most recent hearing, and obviously Congress is like very much looking into it. They're not trying to, get sound bites in. Like they're asking good questions, and I just hope they continue to do this work because I think it's really important.
One thing I would say about the hearing is I was so satisfied with the interactions between the Congress people. Regardless of whether their staffers are on board with this, which I think some of their staffers are not on board with this. I will say that the degree of camaraderie between the Congress people and their willingness to collaborate on the questioning process, even using certain, quirks within the rules for how the hearing has to be run in order to provide additional time for certain Congress members to ask additional questions. That's the type of bipartisanship you kind of don't really ever see right now, and it was really nice to see at that point. I will say it was also really nice to see the level of trust and comfort that a lot of the Congress people expressed with their interactions with David Grush.
Yeah, I will say this just on the comment of like bipartisanship, and this is just my personal take here.
Yeah.
I felt like the 2023 hearing was the most bipartisan one. Like you had Matt Gaetz and AOC in the room asking questions. Like these were at the time very name brand politicians, and there was a lot more presence and there was a lot more bipartisanship in the 2023. It was the most well-attended congressional hearing, at least from the representatives' perspective. This year for the 2025 one, and also in 2024, it's like a majority of the people that are asking the questions are Republican. Like there were Democrats there, right? They had Crockett as the Democrat minority chair.
Moskowitz as well.
Yeah, Moskowitz, but Moskowitz has been around this for a while.
Right.
He's ostensibly like, the Democrat side of the UAP task force, if you will. That's, government side. But the other like Democrat lawmakers, like, some of them did kind of try to make it a little bit more political, talking about whistleblowers in general and the Trump administration. And I don't know, like we've had crazy.
To their credit, it was only one of them that did that.
Right. Yeah, sure. But I just noticed that there was less Democrat interest or less Democrat involvement, or just kind of Googling like what parties these people are from, and then just kind of listening to the questions and how they're kind of structuring their 5 minutes on the microphone. So yeah, I
still can't believe Boebert had put in a question about the Van Allen radiation belt in there.
Well, she was the one that asked about. Yeah, well, she was the one that said like, oh yeah, we have sources telling us that there's like a hybridization program. So she's no stranger to saying like provocative stuff in hearing in session.
Rob, before you do your rankings, I also want to say Borland was excellent for kind of diving into how Aero and DOD, specifically our good friend Susan, likes to mold the term extraterrestrial as a scapegoat to avoid any sort of legalese or legal implication of non-human intelligence, biologics, and craft. To have that on a congressional record now is fantastic, and he really eloquently spoke about that.
Yeah, I really loved that. And what's funny is that just the day after, or was it the day after, or was it the same day? Somebody reached out to her via email. I think it was Kyle Warfels did. I saw his post on Twitter, where he asked if they could amend the statement to
of extraterrestrial,
like these other taxonomies. Yeah, if they could include other taxonomies, and she said, absolutely not. You may not amend my statement whatsoever.
And that taxonomy was just non-human. It wasn't even anything specific.
It was like just very general and vague. But she's like, no, you cannot change the language whatsoever. So there's some clear gamesmanship going on here with that.
Yeah.
And it's great to have that exposed for the American people.
Let's hear your rankings, Rob.
I mean, obviously, the 2023 hearing is the mother of all hearings.
Yeah.
If it wasn't, why is the number one guy at that hearing on staff now directing the the questioning, basically? So I mean, that was the best. This hearing is number two. It's really close up there, and I think it's close up there because it's a sign of what's to come. I hope. If we can, keep this push and keep attention in Congress on this, I think there's great things that we can achieve for the people involved, especially the whistleblowers and, the American people in general. It's just tough because like you said, we do need to get more people on the other side of the aisle engaged.
Right.
And while we did want to do some of that the day after, I don't want to touch on anything that took place in the news there, and we're not going to.
Right.
But we were a little bit of a victim of the news cycle there, in that we were not afforded the opportunity. So it's unfortunate, but we'll get there. We're going to have more trips to DC. We're going to be up there, and we're going to be talking to people. So it's a marathon, not a sprint. When it comes down to it, the 2024 hearing, I just kind of don't count that one.
Right.
Just going to put it there. So
it's still relevant. I mean,
anything.
I mean, look,
but like if I wanted to talk to Mike Gold, I could message him on LinkedIn and get him on a Zoom call within probably 30 minutes.
Okay. And I did talk to Mike Gold the night before, and he didn't have anything to say. Let me give my quick breakdown, and then we'll start going with the questions, because there's some great questions in the chat. Remember, if you got a question for anybody, if it's a specific person, put their name and then put it in all caps. So one thing I got to say is, I know Jeremy Corbell sometimes gets a lot of hate. I mean, sometimes he can go a little far and give people a bit of a bad taste. However, I saw firsthand with this hearing that he was somebody the witnesses could lean on tremendously. He was there for the witnesses. He supported them. He helped them get to where they needed to go. He was there for them just to be kind of a rock to lean on. And so real hats off to Jeremy. I thought he was excellent. Same with his friend Dan Cleary. Dan Cleary helped out with the witnesses as they needed, did what they needed, provided a kind of an aura of friendliness, and he was very cavalier, great guy. But I have to agree with both of your rankings that this was the second best hearing, not far off from the 2023 with 2024. I'm kind of with Rob, where I don't really count that, because there was, of course, a lot of controversy with Schellenberger and the Immaculate Constellation documents. Mike Gold, again, I talked to him, not much else to say. Lou Elizondo, just a little bit of a gray area there. And then Admiral Gallaudet, wow, a fantastic person to hear from, not necessarily any firsthand experience. Of course, the 2023 hearing was carried by Dave Grush. And I'm not exaggerating there, but I think the quality across the board of the witnesses with this hearing was a little stronger, because Ryan Graves, excellent witness, Commander David Fravor, excellent witness. Their stories have been around and dissected for many, many years at this point. Nusatelli had a lot more to give. So did Chief Wiggins. George Knapp, first time you're hearing him in Congress, and then of course Borland. So I just thought the average level of witnesses was stronger, but of course the pinnacle is Mr. David Grush. It was a real treat to hear from George Knapp on stage too. I think Clint said it, but it was like listening to your grandfather in the room. Just a comforting individual to hear from. Let's go to this question, because this is a great question from Birdie. We'll see everyone's thoughts. What were your thoughts when they asked the witnesses to name individuals? I'm sure you guys probably think the same thing, but immediately I knew it was going to be Jim Ryder, and I hoped it Glenn Gaffney as well. Now, I don't know if you saw it on the screen, but it was Jeremy Corbell that reminded George Knapp about Glenn Gaffney. So another tip of the hat to Mr. Corbell. Glenn Gaffney, of course, was CIA DS&T Deputy Director, and Jim Ryder was VP of Lockheed Martin Space Systems Company, and they were involved in the 2011, possibly 2009 Kona Blue failed material transfer from Lockheed Martin through to a DHS PSAP, Prospective Special Access Program, to OSAP and Bigelow Aerospace. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, Rob, why don't you go ahead? I got it.
Okay, I'll go first. I'm not sure I would have named names.
Yeah. But these names have been out there for so long.
Yeah. And yeah, they've been out there, but like, I'm not sure I would have at least said some of those names, just because I don't know. That's hard for me to say. Yeah, just throw Glenn Gaffney's name out there. He knows. I mean, I'm about to put his name out there in something later, so why not? But
let me ask the group this. Sorry.
Yeah.
Isn't Glenn Gaffney the one that Arrow has like a signed affidavit statement saying that he had no knowledge of like a program? Like this was covered in the volume 1 of the records report. I remember they discussed that they had some executive service member, probably from CIA, that like had like he was accused that he was involved in like the shutdown of the transfer.
I could be wrong, but I think that was the 2009 transfer. That was the kibosh was put on by Clapper, because there were 2 transfer attempts, and the Arrow historical report specifically mentions 2009, but it could be 2011. It could be Kona Blue.
Got you. Yeah, I just remember that bit from Arrow's interesting historical records report, like, hey, we have this signed statement from this guy, and I think it was inferred it was Gaffney, but I know obviously the paper trail and like who said what and who ultimately shot this thing down. It's kind of that's kind of the debate. But back to one of the other people, like Dr. Jim Ryder. Oh my gosh, like hearing that kind of get entered in. Shout out Jim Ryder, man. I remember like when we were looking at kind of the stuff that's like out there publicly on him, like he's got the most interesting like lectures and stuff that he did, like talking about the nature of the soul and, you know, having a lecture in early 2017 saying, no, actually, I prefer the term UAP, which is extremely based because New York Times didn't happen until 2017, or December 2017. So, yeah, I mean, more people need to look into this guy. More people need to be aware. You know, if anything, like, you know, I understand that, like, looking at scary stuff and, you know, people are getting killed over this thing, but, you know, hearing a very high up person from like a very respectable organization talking about very interesting metaphysical concepts, like when I was watching it, I'm like, there's no way that this guy doesn't know anything. You know what I mean?
I was a little bit surprised Knapp said Ryder was the gatekeeper role. You know, as far as it appears to me, Ryder was just a legacy program member. He wasn't actively doing gatekeeping structures. This is stuff like SAPCO, SAPOC, under SecDef, these sorts of offices. So that was a bit bizarre. I think he just wanted to get that name out. And Jim Ryder makes sense because Jim Ryder passed in 2018, and his name has kind of become infamous with Lockheed Martin. So I think that is probably why Ryder was said.
Yeah, and Knapp also mentioned too, he was like, you know, basically within these corporations, like they're not able to like disclose this stuff on their own. They are operating at the mercy of their customer, or which is basically like, you know, whatever SAP agency, whatever. So it's not like Jim Ryder has the final say on like, hey, we should give this stuff to OSAP. Like it's someone within the government that's like dealing with the actual program. So
I think they just used the wrong term there, really, in my opinion. I think he's just using a generalized term, gatekeeper, as like somebody who is holding some of the keys. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So. Let's move on to this question. Was the smoking gun of the hearing the fact that whistleblowers had their lives ruined? Isn't that the proof? Not necessarily. David Grush, of course, has faced horrific reprisals, but due to the how kind of quiet that man is, how much he does not like his personal life exposed, we haven't heard much from him. Mr. Borland was extremely vulnerable, and I cannot tip my hat off enough for him speaking about how bad the whistleblower reprisals have been against him. But I still find on Twitter and social media platforms people kind of jumping through logical loopholes and doing mental gymnastics to kind of excuse why Dylan Borland's life is now awful, and to kind of relegate that to him saying he never had any legacy program exposure.
Yeah, I mean, just as a moral note, if you need to try and justify to yourself why somebody's life got fucked up, I don't know, man. I don't know what to tell you on that one. Like, nobody needs to have a horrible life for any reason whatsoever. So,
yeah, I mean, I feel like part of the hearing being public and all that is to kind of show kind of the stonewalling and the issues that are apparent or inherent in this investigation, right? Like if they're getting stonewalling behind the scenes, and also like, oh, I can't tell you this without like being in a skiff. Like, yeah, I can see very clearly that this is an extremely difficult process and a difficult thing to tackle, you know, because like you need the knowledge, you need to be right person, right time, ask the question, you know, kind of catch them off surprise. Because again, this is like, you know, it's like the black program varsity team. You know, you're going up against the best, so to speak. So seeing that play out, like, you know, and I don't really have an appreciation for it because I've never worked in government. I've never held a clearance, none of that stuff. But it paints a very clear picture of like, there's something going on here and there's something being covered for it, you know, and the whole whistleblower and the retaliation of whistleblowers, like they need to be protected, full stop. People shouldn't be murdered for speaking out and saying the truth or their truth. That's just, it's ridiculous. Like we live in a society. So
what's interesting too is the amount of individuals that never get to the whistleblower status because they fear the reprisals before they happen so much. And a lot of the time that's the pension, not necessarily threats to their lives, but threats to their livelihood when these people have families, when they have retired at a GS-15 level and enjoy a salary that they've earned for putting decades of their life in the service. They fear that quite a bit. Let's see what thank you, Laxative Pain, very much. I remember you. I remember your profile picture. Do you have any takes on the validity of the Russian documents? I've never looked into them myself. Yes, they are legit. This is the Thread 3 docs. And Thread 3 basically serves as a container of various UFO reports, stuff like possibly legacy program docs from unit. Do you remember the unit, Rob?
73779?
73790 at the end?
Yes, I think there's a 0.
Okay.
5 or 6 digit number. I'll have to go back into the documents. We were talking about this the other night and I completely forgot.
Yeah, Night Shift. But those are great documents. I'll be interested to see if Burleson gets those into the congressional record because they talked about them a little bit. But Thread 3 has been something that people have been interested in a long time. And a while ago, actually, if you guys remember, on Reddit, there was that prospective self-claimed whistleblower who posted some images of the Bass documents. Those were publicly available online, but then also claimed to have some knowledge on Thread 3, which hopefully we get to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean,
I've been Googling it. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Sorry. I was just saying, I just wanted to confirm it's 73790. I was Googling in the background. So it's the,
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. I was just going to say, like, some of those documents have come out, but I mean, I met the director for Jurassic World while I was at the at the hearing. So I mean, if that tells you what's going on, I mean, he's the guy who's directing the George Knapp film, and you kind of want to make a movie about the guy who went into Russia during the fall of Russia and got a shitload of secret documents out. That's a pretty cool story.
I got to sit right by him. And so Jeremy introduced him to me as the guy who is directing the George Knapp film. I had no idea he was Colin. It's Trevorrow, right?
Trevorrow, yeah.
Trevorrow. I had no idea he was the guy who directed Jurassic World. Which one was it? Dominion, the third Jurassic World film?
I think he was the director that took over for the guy that quit after the second one. So.
Yeah. And he was supposed...
I haven't seen it, so...
I think he had a script in for Star Wars 9, Rise of Skywalker as well. But yeah, he told me a little bit about the film and kind of the stuff he's going to put in it, and without any studio interference, I think that's going to be a pretty big passion project. Let's see what this says, because I think you guys will have an interesting take here. The triangle sighting guy Borland name dropped NASA, but nobody asked more about it. Why do you think that happened?
I mean, it was near a NASA hangar, is why he said NASA, right?
Yeah.
So NASA has hangars on that facility at Langley. That it was Langley, correct? I'm not mistaking that.
It was Langley.
So NASA does have hangars at that facility at Langley. Most of the things that they have there are test platforms, older jets and other air platforms that have been retired by other services that then get repurposed by NASA to be used for atmospheric testing and all kinds of other reasons. Flight observation of rocket launches, things of that nature. It's not necessarily a big deal that he name dropped NASA there. It's just in proximity to it. It's an actual location data point. So,
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and as far as I'm aware, I mean, maybe you guys in your own research have some ideas too, but very rarely, only from one firsthand witness I know, do I ever come across NASA. I very rarely see NASA implicated in legacy structure or legacy programs.
The only times I've ever heard NASA being implicated in anything legacy program or UAP cover-up wise is the restriction of certain imagery data and sensory data from NASA platforms that likely gets intercepted prior to publication. So, yeah,
I'll just add, I've had the great fortune of talking to several pretty high up people in NASA, just from my own kind of family, friends, and whatnot. I talked to a guy that was very high up at the Johnson Space Center, who swore up and down that it was like, no, we've never been involved in this stuff. We've never seen aliens, whatnot. It was also like going into my meeting with him, like one of my family friends was like, hey, he's super interested in UFOs, so he might like ask you about it. And the first 30 minutes was like, hey, buddy, we've never seen anything. Like, can we talk about something else? So like, massive respect for NASA, massive respect for, the space agency and for what they do. But I've talked to a handful of people that, swear up and down that, there isn't like a TR-3B with NASA engravings or, stickers on it. So I don't know, I don't think it's NASA though.
Let's see, this one's to me, but I'd like to hear what you guys think too. Have you ever met anybody that you think would make as big of an impact as Grush if they were to go to Congress and testify? And my answer just is a simple yes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys know in your own personal lives any such witnesses? I'm a resounding yes.
I'm a pass.
Not in my personal life, no. But I imagine that there are probably people that are either investigators or people that are a little bit more friendly to getting this stuff out there, that if they were given the opportunity to step forward and say what they know, I think they would do it. And I think it would be extremely revelatory.
I mean, I say I pass, but like basically my answer is yes. Like,
yeah.
I mean, but I'm not going to go into it, but yes.
Yeah,
There are
that's
people that could testify that could absolutely say some crazy things that you would not fucking believe, but
yeah.
they also have proof.
Yes, yeah. You
So,
can leave it there,
Right.
Rob. That's where I'm
yeah,
leaving it. It's just yeah.
exactly.
Dead Video Club, thank you very much, sir. I don't know if testifying in front of Congress would be very scary. I don't think I've earned that right, but I would like to, behind closed doors, meet with some Congress folk or possibly even higher up and just discuss legacy program layout, involved entities, high level gatekeepers, questions across the map. As a thought exercise, if you guys were, let's say, meeting with House Oversight Committee tomorrow, they said, "Hey, Kermit, Rob, prepare a briefing package. What would you guys want to talk about?"
I mean, I know
Yeah.
what Kermit and I would probably want to talk about. And it's probably the financial stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very much follow the money. Shoot, I would love nothing more as a number cruncher to have, like, say, a financial analyst or someone that's aware of like the corporate money movement that just steps out of the woodwork and he's like, hey, this is the balance sheet of our program. So there's that. But if people are getting killed over the existence or acknowledging the existence of this stuff, then it's like, I think a balance sheet and seeing that and disclosing that's a little far off. So it's state secrets and money is part of it.
Yeah, I mean, the reason that I go to the money too is also that the money also solves a lot of other political problems that these politicians are quote unquote trying to solve supposedly.
Mhm.
So if you could point them at this and they can say, oh, that's where it goes, then you can start to solve a lot of other weird problems too. But I think that also becomes a huge quagmire. That's the next word I'll use. Quagmire.
Kerm, you and I were talking about this a little bit. I think we all agree that starting to talk to the House and Congress specifically more about financial side and possible funding avenues of legacy programs is very critical. But as Rob just said, it's a quagmire to kind of take down. We have multiple funding methods, everything from misappropriation of funds to corporate IRAD to possibly cash deliveries and an a la carte basis. It almost seems like an impossible kind of thread to unravel without just completely somehow absorbing legacy programs into traditional oversight channels.
Yeah, I think it's kind of twofold. Like, first, you do need to demonstrate existence and be like, hey, this is where the stuff is. And then you can kind of tailor or focus kind of like an audit kind of investigation of like following the money, because especially like if they've been able to cover for this program by doing things like, money laundering or, skimming off of normal contracts, like they've put in a lot of work to obfuscate the audit trail, and it becomes I think it's almost impossible to kind of start out by like trying to follow the money to the program. Like, you would basically need to understand what that program is first, and then try to piece together and reverse engineer the balance sheet, so to speak, of like, okay, this is what happened to the cash, this is where it went, so on and so forth. So yeah, it's kind of both aspects, I'd say.
Both of you guys, I think, could make a real serious splash in the kind of pulling on threads of financial stuff in here. And that's all. You don't have to say anything for now, but I think both of you guys have quite a bit to offer in this subject.
Yeah,
Let's real fast. Let me just say thank you to Matt R, because you are a true baller, my friend. That is incredible.
Yeah.
Thank you. You just, the day before we all left, I treated these boys to some brunch. So thank you from all of us for the brunch, my friend. Thank you so much. What were you saying, Rob?
Well, I was just going to say that the other pitfall there, when I say quagmire, I also mean like when you have to look at like lobbying and funding, you don't necessarily have conducive individuals with all of the congresspersons that are out there. And I'm not going to point out any individual congressperson or anybody like that, but I am going to say that there are complex webs of loyalties. I mean, this is politics after all. It's, they made a show based on it called Game of Thrones. I'm joking. But it's a complex thing. You can't just, look at a politician and know where all of their loyalties lie, nor can you trust that a politician who says that they are, fully engaged with you all the time is actually doing so for the right reasons.
Right.
They may turn on you once their policy aim is achieved and no longer follow through to what the actual needed finish is. So it's a tough game. That's why we need more lobbyists involved with this, and we need more people who are going out, like, they were saying on night shifts, Doomer Friday earlier, you got to go out and make your voice heard. I mean, everybody that was there at this hearing is somebody who just wanted to be there.
Well, almost everybody.
Yeah, right. Well, exactly.
And I do just want to say that's a great point. I mean, I'm aware of some former Congress folk, not Mike Turner, that were kind of on legacy payroll, and those names have been kind of turned in to people who can properly investigate that subject. So let's hope some good things come out of that. We talked about this earlier, but maybe we have a couple new ideas. Just because I think we spoke about this when only a few people were him, but the possible outcome for a Kirkpatrick subpoena. I don't think any of us agree would be necessarily beneficial. The way I understand things with Sean Kirkpatrick is, with how egotistical this man is, I think it was a safe assumption that some people thought he might be the one to crack that we're not alone on this planet, that there's a non-human intelligence. But somewhere along the way at Arrow, if he had already not been read into programs, he was sort of briefed on some facet of legacy program operations, maybe not full crash retrieval reverse engineering. This could have been something like NRO Sentient analyzing craft. And then around the time of the Arrow Historical Report Volume 1, he was at least top line read into further programs so he could adequately redact and keep the Arrow Historical Report Volume 1 as wasteful, including the cleared Arrow Historical Report Volume 1 as wasteful and kind of non-beneficial as possible. Let's okay. This is a good one we can touch into. The take of Bob Lazar at the hearing. So Bob was mentioned by both Knapp and Dylan Borland, because do you guys remember when Dylan Borland was asked what's kind of the smoking gun information, and he said Bob Lazar, which is really interesting as a guy who has said he brushed up against knowledge of legacy programs. What's your take on this?
Do you want to go first, Kermit?
Yeah, I'll just say, I mean, in my analysis of like kind of all that's been said so far from firsthand or perceived firsthand individuals, look, apparently Bob Lazar is a dirty name. Bob Lazar is a name that if you say it, it's like saying the name Voldemort, and it'll take you out behind the shed. I think the modern version of that now, saying Dave Grush too, is kind of the same thing. Basically, like, I think like the importance of Bob Lazar and his story is that he was someone that worked on the programs, and he went out publicly and was like, this is what we saw, and this is what I saw, this is what I worked on. And I think from the deep state's perspective, right, having someone that's like able to get out and tell the truth, even though he might have been discredited or whatever, like he was able to survive. Like there's apparently been cases where people don't make it that far, and we're not aware of those stories because they never made the front page, but Bob did. And also Bob hasn't changed his story at all, and he there's ways of looking at it where he was basically systematically discredited by the federal government, and they've tried their damnedest to make sure that no one takes him seriously or looks into it seriously. So yeah, good shout out by Borland. I was very happy that he mentioned it. I'm curious to talk to that man in person, just to pick his brain, but also like I said, I don't have a clearance. So if there's certain questions that I ask and he says I'd have to answer that in the skiff, well, unfortunately I can't be there. So there's that.
I sent Luigi Venditilli of Project Gravatar a text after that, just saying Bob has been mentioned multiple times. What's your take, Rob?
On Bob Lazar? I mean,
just on him being talked.
He was mentioned. I like the fact that he was mentioned a lot, because I think what Bob Lazar does is really sort of exemplify the toolkit of the legacy counterintelligence program. Mm-hmm. Sure, Bob's career choices are not your eyes career choices. Well, maybe they're closer to my career choices than you guys's, but I would gladly do some of the things that Bob has done, whether it's running a cat house or, working at Los Alamos and strapping a rocket to my car. But my point here is that Bob, for all of his quirks, probably did work at S4 and probably was shown some things. Whether or not he was chosen because he was the best person is probably not the case. He was probably chosen because of his ability to be discredited, which is pretty common amongst all the things that we see from these legacy program employees, whether they choose low-level employees that are human trafficked for that purpose, or whether they choose, low-level employees that are easy to discredit and cast aside. It doesn't matter. Bob fit that bill, and I've gone back and forth probably 20 times in the last 2 years over whether or not I believe Bob Lazar. And at this point, I'm firmly on the side of believing that Bob Lazar was at least shown things, right? They at least brought him in to show him things, whether they were real things, counterintelligence information, who knows? But Bob was brought in, he did see things, he hasn't changed his story, and there was absolutely a major effort to make sure that Bob Lazar didn't go around and tell the world and didn't look good doing it. So I just think for that reason alone, he's a fantastic example for ufology, period. Whether or not the sports model exists, whether or not all that, that's beside the point.
So even outside of Bob, for one, interest in S4, I'm convinced fully that S4 exists from conversations of people who have told me they've been to the site.
Sigma 4.
And it's resounding similarities. But I think you guys said that eloquently, and I couldn't answer that better than you two. So let's continue with this. What was said or shared that was most impactful? I think for me, Borland speaking about reprisals against him and his difficulty navigating this space as a whistleblower.
I mean, same. I immediately resonated with a lot of the things that Borland was expressing, from his desire to do the right thing. And that's what shined through the best for me, was that these guys are guys that are being penalized for doing the thing that they were taught was right. And there's nothing more wrong than that in my eyes.
Kerm?
Yeah. Wiggins being there and like monumental in the sense that he is active military. That I hope is a model for things to come. Like, if anything, we've even heard from the president himself. We've heard from Donald Trump on the Joe Rogan podcast where he's like, oh, I get briefed by these pilots that are hotter than Tom Cruise, and they have orbs that are going and doing loop-de-loops around my F-22. It's like, okay, great. Well, if these service members are seeing this actively, there should be a channel set up for them to say, like, this is what I saw. This should be the norm. If you guys are seeing weird stuff, and I think in the Navy culture specifically, and I think Wiggins talked about this, like, you guys are on a ship. When the crew sees it, it kind of spreads around like wildfire because you're on that boat for a 6, 12, 18th month deployment, whatever. And so it's like whenever the crew kind of sees something, everyone else kind of knows about it, So good looks on the U.S. Navy, honestly. Yeah. That was kind of the meta thing that I was thinking about, where I'm like, hey, we hear about all these different agencies and branches that are like, no, don't say that word. Meanwhile, it's like the Navy, not only are they potentially supporting a whistleblower coming out, active military person saying like, this is what I saw. But I mean, a couple of years ago, they were the ones that put out a statement during the height of the COVID lockdown saying, hey, remember those leaked New York Times videos? Yeah, those were ours. And those depicted UFOs. We don't know what those are. So I don't know if the Navy's super friendly to this, but at least from the signaling that I saw and, Wiggins being there, I think that was, in my mind, that's one of the most impactful things other than what we've kind of discussed.
Well, that's interesting. The Navy being so forthcoming with UFOs, because one hand of the Navy seems very forthcoming, and the other hand of the Navy, as far as I understand, is deeply embedded in legacy program operations, probably even more so than the Air Force, because it involves a maritime component as well as an air component. And of course, the subject of USO is a very, very tightly guarded secret. So hopefully at some point we understand why that is. Let's see. This is a great question. A lot of the social media discussion is about the video as opposed to the whistleblower testimony. What do you think of using dead dropped videos that can steal the show?
I have thoughts on that I'd love to share.
Let's go, Rob.
Go for it.
So I mentioned this really briefly on Night Shift earlier, but I think that video is a win-win for a couple different reasons. Specifically, like when you think about it, when you look at this video, the provenance of the video is so highly classified that you're very unlikely to see the video declassified for any reason whatsoever, right? So, which means that the people who really, really, really want answers about that video are probably not going to get them, because the only time videos really get declassified rapidly is when they're politically convenient. Like when we got videos declassified within like hours of Russian bomber task force overflights near the Alaskan border. Well, because we wanted to show that to the news. That's why. Have you seen footage of the Yukon or Alaska shootdowns? Absolutely not, and you never will. Point being, this video is never really going to get answered for the most part. So it serves a good purpose in focusing people's attention on some very important real world things. It focused people's efforts on getting these videos declassified and on battling the heavy classification standards that are in place. And then if it does get declassified, great, we can argue about it then. But if it doesn't, it serves as a point of contention for people to constantly talk about the subject and drive attention. If anything, it's a cool looking video.
It's brought a ton of new eyes to the subject too. I know the Night Shift was speaking about this, and I can say for myself, even as of today, I was at training jujitsu, and a couple guys who used to be Army infantrymen come up to me and said, "Hey, did you see that Hellfire video? What do you think about it?"
Yeah, I mean, it's a crazy video, right? And
It's
even
Oh, go ahead, Rob.
even with all the prosaic explanations that are offered, we don't have those answers yet. So if it does turn out to be prosaic, it's no big deal to me, in my opinion, because at this point, one data point, one or the other, is not about to sway my opinion on UAP. If anything, it should tell you, oh shit, we shoot at anything, first of all, and two, we didn't shoot it down.
Kerm, what do you think?
My gut reaction to that video is this has all the hallmarks of like kind of a Corbell kind of style video drop that we've seen before. So I'm not going to speculate, but that's just kind of what it reminded me of. This is a way different video in the sense that it not only depicts a UFO, but like us engaging with the target with a Hellfire missile. And I also understand, like, yeah, there's a lot of debate right now around these videos. Obviously, like, we're talking about parallax again, and kind of, Mick West is running his analysis as we speak, and I think it's already been done. But it's interesting. Like, there's a lot of reasons why this video is interesting, and I think a lot of people have already pointed out. One of them is that, the specific missile, the air-to-ground Hellfire missile, it's air-to-ground. So usually these drones are equipped to strike targets on the ground. But if anything, this video shows us using those same missiles to strike a target in the air. And I know a little bit more some normie commenters, so to speak. They've been like, well, this might be a little bit of saber rattling on the U.S.'s part. Maybe Burleson's part of some giant psyop to kind of let China know that this missile's air to air. It's like, okay, great. But like, what type of 4D chess play really is that, And like, why would you do it during the UFO hearing? It's just, that doesn't really make sense.
60 type of missiles and 60 more that you've never heard about.
Yeah. And don't get me started on the Ginshu missile. Yeah, and don't get me started on that Ginshu missile, bro. Like, it's not the Blade. It's not the Blade one. Like, that's owned by very specific people. And like, no.
Yeah, exactly. Anybody who says that it's like the R9X Hellfire is probably incorrect and hasn't done even a little bit of research. And not to talk crap, but that missile is usually handled by CIA assets only and is used when a personnel strike package has been authorized against a specific individual, which means, in layman's terms, assassination. If that Hellfire wasn't on that Predator with somebody's name written on it, basically, which may or may not actually even be true in that case sometimes, then it's not an R9X. So it is what it is.
Yeah.
But Kerm, what you said about some of the hallmarks of other videos, that is interesting because, of course, the jellyfish video, there's been rumors that there's prior footage of that thing emerging from the sea. And now there's kind of open discourse that this Hellfire video, that on SipperNet, there's following footage out there that shows the craft either assembling itself back together or carrying on its flight trajectory after the near impact or impact with the missile.
Yeah. And then also, the famous gimbal video too. Allegedly, there was a whole fleet of them. It's like we never saw it. Like, all we really saw was the craft kind of rotating seemingly like in the shot. But apparently, and so it was said, is like there were multiple of those objects. Like, where's the video about that? And I do kind of agree with everybody of like, yeah, we need the full video because, it's it's very provocative to show us firing at something,
Yeah.
kinetically engaging with, you know, a UFO or whatever that target is, and then not revealing the full context. It's like, well, you're just trying to show us like one specific thing, and that's great, but you know, if we want to have a scientific discussion, an analysis of like what actually happened, like we need all the data, and that also includes. And, you know, and I understand that there's classification issues with it, but that also includes like the telemetry, the stuff that was kind of cropped out of the shot just so we could just see the anomaly, but not all like, you know, the coordinates and like how fast the thing is moving like that, you know, not to advocate for, you know, just like complete mysticism or just kind of like full belief in it. It's like, we need the data, you know, I think we really do.
The immediate effect of the video was very impactful. I mean, I'm sure you guys felt it too. It was very, very, very dramatic in the room when that was shown. And then each witness being asked if the video scared him. Super dramatic.
Yeah.
Let's.
I'll say this.
Ahead,
this is a funny story. So Rob and I, we were sitting third row in the hearing room, and there was a guy sitting next to us that was, I think, Channel 4 UK documentary. And when that video was shown, I was sitting next to him, and he like started filming me and my reaction. And I was like, "Oh God, I'm gonna be on a UK documentary, like being the
I didn't even notice
facial
that
reaction." Yeah, I didn't. I tried not to like look at the camera because I'm like I wanted to make sure he had a good shot, but I also tried to curb my enthusiasm, so to speak, because I'm like, okay, he's got me on film. So that was interesting.
He got me with my jaw on the floor, dude. Like,
yeah,
I was like.
Also, speaking of documentarians, shout out to Estimate of the Situation.
Yes.
For doing great work filming boots on ground and also giving all three of us one of the Estimate of the Situation comics that are awesome. Let's see, because this is a great question. What questions would you have asked the panel if you were on the congressional board? And that's a great question. Of course, there's a limited time. Let's each in the hearing, let's each go one by one and just kind of circle around. I, for one, would have asked George Knapp more about his interactions with firsthand witnesses. Of course, that's secondhand information, but still very valuable to have as just a starting point off the top of my head. What do you guys think?
I have to think really hard about this question because there's... One second. I'm sorry, chat. I apologize. You'll have to go to Kermit for me.
Yeah, I got something, and this is kind of a novel thought here. So Spielberger, right? The Pogo Oversight Whistleblower Advocacy nonprofit. I would just be curious, and I'm sure they probably figured this out beforehand, but like, has that organization ever worked with people that had, you know, claimed knowledge of these types of programs? Like, has his organization ever, you know, worked with like any specific whistleblower? Not to like name names or anything, but like, hey, like you're here kind of as a, you know, representative of like kind of the legal advocates for whistleblowers. I'm curious, you know, is this something that your organization has seen previously, or is this something that you guys are monitoring? Like, it was great for him being there, and that was wonderful, and like having that representation. I would be curious if this was something that, you know, Pogo and his organization has been tracking or even assisting whistleblowers in the past. So that's, yeah.
I'm going to have to pass on this one because I would probably try and ask a leading question that involves privileged information.
Okay.
I wouldn't say look.
That's okay. And hey, the Twitters are in the video description. So if you ever think of something, just make a tweet and people will see it there. Let's ask here, because this is a little bit differently framed than towards Kirkpatrick. Can a task force with subpoena power compel anyone under U.S. jurisdiction, such as SAIC or Lockheed Martin executives? Not necessarily. There can be a subpoena cannot force a witness to testify. I mean, so, I personally know. Go ahead, Rob.
Oh, I was just going to say, having spoken to a couple of different lawyers on this subject over the course of the past month, including some folks with some congressional experience, I would say that there's two typical outcomes. We talked about this earlier. There's generally two typical outcomes that take place when a subpoena is issued in the United States Congress. And that is either A, the witness is advised to show up by their counsel and plead the fifth to every single question without, like not selectively, but to every question without fail. The other option, the alternative, is that they are advised by the executive branch usually not to show up whatsoever. And has there ever been any consequence for doing that? No. Because there is no enforcement arm for that currently.
So let's see this. Let's frame this question as people we can name, because I'm sure we can all think of 20 people you can't name that you would like to testify as witnesses. But who are your 4 choices you want for the next hearing? Kerm, I'm putting you on the spot. Let's start with you.
Okay. Glenn Gaffney, he's been named. He's getting I don't care if bro pleads the fifth the whole time. Like, the country needs to see that happen in real time. At least they got to see one of these guys that's like obviously pleading the fifth. Like, it's the same kind of vibe with like Borland saying, I have to tell you in a skiff. Like, every kind of denial and block. Like, it's, it's not smoking gun evidence, but it's like, there's a little bit of smoke there. There's something going on there. What are they covering for? So he'd be up there on my list. James Lukatsky as well. This is another person who would probably, I think he literally told Knapp and Corbell, like, I would lie to Congress. So far, not really great witnesses that would be overtly transparent, at least from my understanding. I'd like to see more guys like Borland come forward, active military individuals as well, like being supported as well. I don't know any names off the top of my head. I'm not privy to those details and kind of who's testified to, Senate Armed Services, Senate Select Committee. But those kinds of caliber of witnesses, kind of the Dylan Borland caliber, Wiggins caliber, Nuccatelli caliber, like, those are good. Those are good witnesses. Also, Jeremy Corbell too. I mean, look, George Knapp's gone up there already. So, and I know Corbell's been, very much like he'd be willing to testify, or I think he's said that previously. So why not? Why not? Well, we've had George Knapp go up there. Also, respect to George Knapp, though. I mean, he brought the Thread 3 documents, which that's amazing. That was also a huge part of the hearing. But sorry to ramble. Those are my picks.
That's okay. Great picks, Rob.
All right. So these are 4 individuals that we are assuming they would answer the questions when I say this. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm going to caveat it with that. Assuming that they would actually answer the questions, the individuals that I would like to see there are Jim Lukatsky. I would like to see. I don't know if I should say this. Man, I would really like to see Robert Cardillo on the stand, who is a former deputy director of intelligence integration. He's a very important person for reasons that I can get into later. Him and Glenn Gaffney together should be on the stand together so that we could find out who maybe had the authority to transfer or to cancel certain transfers. And then my 4th person, I saw a bunch of people mention this in the chat, and I really liked this idea, is Dan Burrish.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
That's really interesting.
Somebody who is probably more materially, connected with it, but as an alternative, Bobby Ray Inman.
Yeah.
If you could get Bobby Ray Inman to talk, that'd be the crown jewels right there in a lot of cases. But
so I'm going to try and delineate known non-hostile witnesses versus potentially hostile witnesses, because there's a ton of potentially hostile witnesses I'd love to see testify, including Bobby Ray Inman. Oh, go ahead, Rob.
A non-hostile witness that we could ask would be John Ramirez.
Great. So yeah, possibly hostile, likely hostile witnesses: Bobby Ray Inman, Paul Kaminsky, Donald Kerr, John Deutsch. The list goes on and on and on. William Owens, on and on and on. But for possibly agreeable individuals that could answer questions, I would say Kirk McConnell in a very pointed, congressionally mandated session. I would also say Senator Marco Rubio, or former Senator Marco Rubio. That would be a very important person. And to play off those two, I would like to see David Grush back there. I know that might seem like a scapegoat answer, but him back there. And as a 4th witness, That's a tricky one. It depends on the types of questions you ask, but I really wouldn't mind Lou Elizondo being on there, being asked about his career in the early 2000s. Very pointed questions that he would be forced to answer. Not defer, but forced to answer to the best of his ability. That would be pretty interesting to me. But that would probably require him in a hostile. Yes, that would require him in a hostile session if you know, my thoughts are real. Pavel asked a question. What's up, Pavel? We all love Pavel. Are you planning to do an episode with Cat Fitz? I have promised Kermit this, and I think I would like to extend this promise to Rob, that if I ever get to interview Cat Fitz, it would be an in-person thing. Kermit was involved. It would be him and I interviewing her, but now I'd like to say it's us three. A full roundtable discussion about financing for UFO legacy programs. She has some of the greatest podcast appearances, if you want to call them that, with Dark Journalist, actually, for like the UFO economy. I'd look those up. They're
Shout
really
out
good.
Dark Journalist.
But so that's what we'll do if Cat Fitz ever gets up there.
Also, just shameless plug as well. Catherine Austin Fitz and Richard Dolan have done a ton of discussions on this stuff. If you're a finance bro like me and you're like trying to wrap your head around the money that's involved, like watch their discussions, because they lay it out in plain English, and it's like, oh, okay, got it. It's like, you know, I think the initial reaction, or I think the normie kind of thought, is like, you hear a lot of her work of like, oh, there's $20 trillion of missing money. And there's a range of possibilities of like what that money is and how much truly is like spent on a UFO program. You know, especially if they're using like financial schemes like money laundering, for example. Like money laundering isn't like a perfect 1-for-1 of like cash in, cash out. Like you actually lose some cash in that process. So if that's what's going on behind the scenes, so to speak, then it's not unreasonable to say that like the $21 trillion is just like half of it's burnt off just because they're trying to obfuscate the audit trail. And then that leaves you with whatever that chunk is left. And, you know, by her estimates with Richard Dolan, it's like anywhere from like $1 to $5 trillion cumulatively, which is still a crazy amount of money, right? And then also like kind of breaking down specifically like, you know, government funds, illicit activities, you know, drug operations, human trafficking, like the crazy stuff. And then even also private funding as well. Like, I think this is a more recent phenomenon that Rob and I have been looking into, of the relationship with like private equity, venture capital, that kind of world in the defense, technology, aerospace, even like other kind of like friendly or UFO adjacent industries like healthcare or education as well. Like if you're thinking about something like a Stargate program or a GATE program, right? Like we've heard this from several people, you know, like having a certain corporation or an entity that's like in that iron triangle of like defense, healthcare, education, like that's a vertically integrated program, or it could be the infrastructure for one, in so many words.
So I'd like to ask the whole chat. You guys see what happens when Kermit's in his bag here? This guy's a genius. Both of them are. Also,
I just read a lot, man.
What do we think are the logical next steps from here? My answer is probably something a lot of people will say that's not good enough, but it's to let David Grush cook and to see what happens next. I think, I know there's a lot of really good work that goes on behind the scenes that I do have a lot of great optimism in this subject right now.
I have so much more optimism after this trip than I had before it. And even that comes with some of the minor disappointments that I had with, you know, politics on display and stuff like that, that it's overshadowed by the optimism that I have after knowing what I know now. So I'm ready to follow the course. That's all I can say.
Yeah. I think, I mean, just kind of watching the post hearing kind of coverage. I mean, even with the craziness of the news cycle this week, it's getting attention, and, you know, it's the videos, it's the testimony, it's the new witness. It's a lot of, you know, the Russian documents. Like there's a lot of stuff and a lot of substance in this hearing that I think people are going to start coming back to. And if anything, I think it's going to use Corbell's parlance, it's going to weaponize people's curiosity, because, you know, it's one thing to speak in generalities about like a multi-decade crash retrieval program, but it's another thing to name like the specific, you know, corporate custodians and also the agency level gatekeepers that are potentially involved with this, and within known stories that, like, you know, researchers have been spending decades and longer kind of looking into. So Yeah, I mean, the door's certainly been open. And then also like Borland's comment, where he had a comment that really stuck with me where he's like, yeah, like I really hope that we do have disclosure, because if this thing goes back behind closed doors, it's going to get really ugly really quickly. And that sounds like catastrophic disclosure, but like the tone of it was like, it's not just like we're going to reveal all the alien stuff and it's, the CIA won't be able to deal with the situation. I think it's going to be like whatever that eventuality is, like it's, to kind of paraphrase from other people that I've listened to speak on this subject. Like it's kind of seen in the same vein as like the intelligence failures around 9/11. Like that's kind of how seriously this is taken at that level. And when you hear those words and that being spoken by serious credentialed people, it's like you can understand the weight of the situation, at least in the way that they describe it. So
I mean, keep in mind that like this subject also causes some of these politicians to realize that their donors are implicated. So it becomes very tough for them to deal with in a lot of ways. I would advise the viewers to keep in mind that the Burchett and Anna Luna bill for banning congressional stock trading is probably somewhat related to this. So
this is a great question here, and it of course pertains to the hearing because Nat made some comments here. A fun fact for the Davis interview, both of these gentlemen were in the room, so both these guys were there live in person. Rob was actually running up handing me notes the whole time. He and Mr. UFO Hackers.
Davis a salad.
Yeah, he brought Davis the salad. So there we go, guys. That's a piece of lore right there. Comment on Knapp/Davis ARV dismissal. They believe no tech breakthroughs despite decades of reverse engineering. So Knapp specifically, he made the caveat of he said he doesn't think there have been many breakthroughs. And if I had to wager, this is because most of his exposure to legacy programs has come from decades and decades of working with Bob Lazar, which that's one of the cornerstones of Bob's testimony is program was put away in '89 due to lack of, or previously due to lack of progress, then brought back out. Davis, and I'd like to hear your guys' comments on this. I've said this before, but I've kind of broken it down into three separate categories. That maybe Jim Ryder fed him some program protection information during the 2011 OSAP transfer. If this material was in fact the Kingman Hall that Lockheed either couldn't figure out or just didn't need anymore, so for whatever reason they wanted to get rid of it, that Davis was read into just SAPs and USAPs surrounding the OSAP material transfer in Kona Blue. Therefore, he wouldn't be read into any peripheral SAPs, and because this was a material transfer, there'd be no SAPs he'd be read into that had any sort of focus on reverse engineering, material exploitation, or C. So 4 possibilities. He is just such a smug scientist. He doesn't think that if he can't figure out how ARV work, that nobody else can. And B, that it's an active program protection strategy. And lately, in the past couple of months, I believe it's D. I think it's an active program protection strategy that he's saying. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think he may have an NDA that requires him to lie about that. I think it's entirely possible that he did get all the way to that stuff. I absolutely think that George Knapp saying there's no ARVs, that's who George Knapp has talked to. George Knapp has not gotten down the ARV rabbit hole like some other people have.
Right.
And that's not really his investigative focus. That's cool. He hasn't seen them. That's fine. I'm pretty convinced they're real. So.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, I'll just say this. Eric's a smart guy, being the frontier alternative propulsion subject matter expert for DoD intelligence agencies. Like, he's a smart guy, right? He's spent decades in these programs and whatnot. Spitballing here, if I am the U.S. legacy program, right, and I'm trying to produce novel insights from recovered materials, I wouldn't want to tell the smart scientists about the stuff we have figured out, because that might introduce bias in their scientific understanding. Like, no, let's start with this stuff first. I'll expose you to this stuff first. Here's the technology. This is what we figured out. See what you can do with it. I mean, I don't know the full extent of Davis's exposure to the crash retrieval stuff, or if he's worked in it, or if he's more knowledgeable than he's putting on. But, at least in that construct, right? If there is technology that we have figured out and you are trying to figure out new stuff from it, you might be introducing bias in the data. You might be introducing bias to that person of hey, this is how the tech works. This is what we've been able to figure out. If that's truly your goal. I don't know. It's purely speculative there, but just kind of a thought appeared to me.
It is interesting how all of the OSAP crew seems to be either dismissive of ARV or not speak about it as well or actively speak around the subject. I'm going to draw attention back to the 2024 hearings when Nancy Mace was asking witnesses about what kind of contractors specialize in the UFO subject. Questions specifically pointed to likely material exploitation. And she asked Mr. Elizondo about Lockheed Martin. He got real squirrely in his seat. Real squirrely. And before we move on, I just want to mention the last thing, because maybe you guys heard this. And if you heard it, I want to know. But as the cameras were off with Davis, the interview was wrapping up, and I had a notebook that has the flux liner on it. I'm sure you guys have seen it. It was a gift to me, actually a gift given to me by a firsthand witness, very near and dear to my heart. But I actually, hold on, I'll hold it up to the camera. I got it right here with me. So this is the notebook I had right here. You can see the flux liner. And I go up to Davis and I show him the notebook. And he says, well, Hal Putoff interviewed primary witness Brad S. And I then launch a host of questions, and either A, Davis ignored me, or B, he just didn't hear. However, his hearing aid was still on. He is hard of hearing, so that could have been a thing, but he was still listening to other people, but he didn't continue with that. So I personally would be really keen to hear from himself and Hal Putoff about how that interview went. And I made a tweet about it, but I think more needs to be dug up there. Here's a good question. Comment on Greer's doc submission mentioning Herrera, Randy, etc. I think Michael Herrera, Randy Anderson are their own people. And if they want to be entered into a congressional or hearing testimony, they can choose to do that. And if they didn't give permission to be entered, I don't think that's appropriate. But of course, it was pretty cool to see. What do you guys think?
I thought it was cool, but it also comes with the same problems that Greer has always had, which is doing things without whistleblowers' permission or without, their knowledge even. So I'm not a big fan of Stephen Greer. I think that whatever good he may have done has been kind of also wiped out by bad things he's done too. But at least that information is out there and we can try and salvage from it what we can.
Yeah, my jaw dropped when he was like, "Yeah, we need to enter additional witnesses in," and Randy Anderson specifically, because Gerb, you and I, we worked together on kind of unpacking that story.
Yeah.
But hearing credits from Stephen Greer, I was like, "What? Like, what?
Yeah.
What?" But we've also, this is kind of a known issue where, like, within his Disclosure Project archive, he's like almost. He's like, oh, I have all these witnesses, but it's like, you didn't actually talk to those witnesses, but you're
Correct.
still including them in the file.
Yeah.
And okay, great. Like, you're trying to create this giant repository for disclosure information, but like, it's weird that you're co-signing your name as if you were the one that did the research and the work. It's just
With Randy specifically, he took a photo with Greer, I think 2020s, and then he sent an email to Greer. That was it. That was the intake that Greer did for his testimony, and then Greer just threw it up on the archive. Greer didn't put himself in a crosshair or do any sort of research into SAIC or the Naval Surface Warfare Center Crane. That was just another one of his whistleblowers to throw in there. The thing about that Disclosure Project list is there's about 700 entries. The vast majority of those entries are points of contact for other firsthand people or even secondhand people. A great deal of those entries Greer has never even spoken to. There's one entry in particular who I have spoken to, and I said, hey, I found your name in Stephen Greer's archive, approached him very confidentially and wanted to learn a little bit more about this person's testimony. And they said, Stephen Greer? I've never spoken to that man. So there's a lot of inherent issues with that list. Of it's just Stephen Greer trying to place a lot of names under him to take credit for. And I think you kind of highlighted that earlier in a tweet, Kermit, that I think was appropriate.
Yeah, and just so we can rehash this real quick. So Greer met Randy.
Correct.
This was prior to the documentary that
Correct.
you put out. Okay. But like there wasn't any, like he didn't have any conversation with Rand. It was like a picture is what you said. Like what was the extent of their interaction?
It was a picture at a Greer event that he took a picture with Stephen Greer afterwards and then sent him an email saying, I saw something at something called Off-World Technologies Division at a naval depot in Crane, Indiana.
Gotcha. Okay. All right.
I would say my other thought on Greer, just before we move off of that, is that y'all have to keep in mind that politicians that are engaging with this subject are doing so sort of with the same learning curve that you or I might have engaged with when we first got into the subject. So some of them are going to get onto Greer. They're going to realize
Right.
that Greer's got some good information, and they've got to
Which he
figure out
does.
the hiccups with Greer and with some of these other like ufology people, like maybe Jaime Maussan, for example. They've got to figure those out in real time, but the amount of time that they can devote to it is not the same amount of time that you or I can. So it's going to be a slower acclimatization process for them to understand what's bullshit and what's not. And a lot of that depends on being able to have good staffers. Burleson, even to his credit with Grush on his staff, is still probably not immune to that either. He still has
Right.
to learn things on his own. So,
Right.
I mean, everybody's human.
I mean, I saw firsthand everybody's trying to get Burleson's ear, right? I went to the
Oh, yeah.
event the night before that was kind of like a reception. It was an invite only thing. There were a lot of people there. I think Danny Sheehan brought Jaime Maussan on because they were doing some interviews together. So, everybody's trying to get Burleson one-on-one and get him presumably some information. I'd like to thank Matt Fouts here as well. That is incredible. Thank you so much, my man. And we'll keep chugging through the questions because we got so many good ones. Why don't they have a skiff already scheduled after the hearing? So very well could be that's not necessarily announced publicly.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely follow-up work. Also, just with the new hi there, Kat. Just with the news cycle going on too. What a beautiful little creature, Rob. With the news cycle going on, I think that there's kind of like a lot of other things going on right now. But
Yeah.
it's Wag Boss. Thank you again, my friend. How about the NASA announcement of the biosignatures? That was also kind of swept up in the news cycle as well. I don't necessarily think planned, just gut instinct. Do you guys think so?
I mean, they sat on that for like, what, a year?
Yeah.
Yes.
Or so? So they've been sitting on that for a year before they were willing to announce it. I mean, you got to at least think like, this is probably a good day for us to say it, right?
Mhm.
I don't know. I feel like there's maybe a little bit of synchronicity there, not necessarily so much planning, but it's like, hey, this is a good opportunity for us to do it today. We finally feel comfortable. Let's just do it then. It would be cool to have had that dominate the news cycle for a day. But
Yeah.
Yeah. My perspective is like walking out of the hearing and then finally getting back on Twitter. Some of the schizo news kind of people, they were hinting that there was some big announcement by NASA tomorrow. And that was like kind of posted after the hearing.
Right.
I don't know to the extent, and good guys at NASA. I've talked with those guys, great people. But yeah, I mean, look, you've been sitting on the data for a year, and then you guys schedule the surprise announcement of a biosignature on Mars, which is like huge. That's monumental, right? And then you just have that the day after this insane hearing. I don't know. I'm so sick of seeing all the patterns. It's like get me out of here. I think we all kind of feel the same way.
So this is a poignant question here. Why is Congress powerless? They can disclose but can't. Well, this is because specifically UFO legacy programs operate outside of traditional oversight channels that Congress and various other committees have no ability to rein in, check finances, check operations, get a head count of various deliverables and so forth. But that's just if you guys have anything to add, it's just these programs operate completely separately from traditional oversight channels.
Yeah, I would just advise anybody who's interested in this to look into like the government oversight project and like the 40-year odyssey that they've been on, just trying to bring in basic oversight that's already mandated by law, not to mention the fact that most of this stuff falls outside that scope.
Yeah.
So
go ahead. Just to add here, like as a guy that was like kind of a government kind of nerd, I liked AP government and all that in high school, and wanted to be a political science major in college. Instead, I became an accountant. But basically, like the trend that you kind of see post World War II is that the executive branch has grown in power substantially. And that's kind of a double-edged sword of like, okay, now we have like, there's a lot more things that the executive can do, but also they are kind of getting outside of the ability to like, for the legislative to enforce oversight. So I think this has kind of been a problem. And I think this issue is sort of a flashpoint for that discussion, because it's like, this is possibly an executive managed program through the White House, national security level. I think we heard that at the National Security Council level. We heard that during the hearing. So, the the legislative branch trying to get answers on this from an executive branch, agency or group that like has insanely high clearances and has the authority to say like, no, you don't have a need to know. It's certainly an uphill fight, but I have a lot of hope because they have really solid people behind the scenes that are helping with this investigation. I mean, namely David Grush, and all other people as well. So, it's a tightrope kind of thing you have to walk, especially if you want to do this right. Because you're up against the executive branch basically.
Right.
So, and they've just grown so much.
So we'll try to move through some questions quickly because Rob, I'm remembering in about 15 or 20, you got to head out, right? Okay. So we'll try to get through some.
Good.
Oh, okay, great. So maybe we'll do
I planned for that.
Okay.
I gave my wife the car, so she's good.
Maybe we'll go to 4:30 Central because I think everybody is loving hearing from you guys. ISAC, thank you for the $5, my friend. So why is a non-human intelligence interacting with humanity? Maybe you guys have something to add here, but I'm going to give the same answer I always do. And I personally find it impossible to attribute human motives to a non-human entity or non-human intelligence. I couldn't begin to try and understand these motives.
Why do sometimes I give my ice cream to ants and other times I stomp on their anthill? I don't know. I'm evil. Was I born that way? I have no idea. People interact with things in weird ways. There's no way for you to possibly understand what's going on in a creature that's probably 10 times more complex than you are. So,
like the cat on your desk right now.
As the cat tail goes across.
A percent chance that a true first-hand program scientist ever tests before Congress. I'd say that's kind of a flip of the coin. I don't think a first-hand scientist would first be marched out before the public. I think that person would be taken through some pretty strict behind-the-scenes SCIF-esque, SAP-F type channels first to kind of explore that person's testimony.
To quote Tim Burchett, I forget what documentary it was from, but I posted it on my Twitter because it's hilarious. He's like, the only way we're going to ever get disclosure is if someone walks out of one of these government labs and posts all the files on the internet before someone shoots them in the back of the head 5 times. And it's like a dramatic, cut thing.
Well, that's a great idea, but good luck going to prison for treason, for bringing documents out of a SAP-F and posting them publicly.
Yeah.
They like to flash around the Espionage Act, man. These guys don't play around. So, I seriously commend people for stepping out of the shadows and coming forward. It takes insane amount of bravery. And, I think definitely after this week, I certainly understand the level of anxiety that I think a lot of these people feel. And I think it only exponentially increases as you get kind of closer to the core program, so to speak.
So we already talked about this a little bit, but should Lakatsky be subpoenaed? We said he could be, but it might not be effective. He has already openly stated he would lie before the Congress.
He stated that on Weaponized.
But the people need to see that. I still think the people need to see that.
Yeah.
So
one person asked really briefly, and I'm sorry to call off this, but I saw this question.
Go ahead.
It was a really awesome question.
Yeah.
Somebody asked really briefly, why wouldn't they subpoena Jay Stratton or call Jay Stratton to testify?
Right.
And I can actually answer that question really well.
Sure.
When I was in Huntsville at SCU, which is Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies Conference, Jay Stratton spoke there. I had the opportunity to meet him really briefly. Interesting guy. Don't really have more of a comment than that on him personally. But what I would say is, having spoken with Lenville Logan while I was there, who was on the UAP task force and was a permanently assigned staff member on the UAP task force, which is not the same as like a liaison or like an attaché to the task force. Like, this is somebody who was on staff, who worked in the office, in their office. I talked to Lenville Logan, and he says, one day I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden this guy calls me up, and people aren't really supposed to have my phone number. And he says, "Hey, is this Logan?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Are you the guy doing all the weird shit?" And he goes, "Yeah, that's me." And he goes, "My name's Dave Grush. I want in." And he goes, "Okay, I don't know who you are, but this is where my office is. You can come and see me." The trick there is that you shouldn't be able to get to that office. You shouldn't have the clearances to be able to get to that office. So it was sort of like yeah, come fucking see me if you can type deal. But the other problem is that 10 minutes later, Dave Grush was in the office saying, hey, where's Logan's office? And he shows up and apparently had more read-ins than Jay Stratton. So, and that is the log that broke the dam
Right.
for them. So at which point, knowing that, there's no real reason for Jay Stratton to come in if most of the information that was actionable was brought to the task force, and the access to that information was brought to the task force by David Grush, who is already a staffer and who has already testified. There's not really a good material reason to call Jay Stratton to the table.
Well said, Rob.
So.
Fantastic statement. Now, Getro's posted this a few times, so I think I brought this up. I know, Kermit, you talked about this. The RX-9 bladed missile hitting the balloon. I personally am not informed enough on this topic, so Kermit or Rob, I know you guys both have opinions on this from the video shown. If you guys want to give a brief word on this.
Yeah, I mean, I'll weigh in right away. Was it the R9X bladed missile? Likely not. That missile is usually only carried by CIA on CIA drone platforms when there is a personnel strike package that's already been authorized. And a personnel strike package is a really nice way of saying assassination. That means they've already figured out the person whose name is on that missile and they know where it's going. So if this was just a drone that was on patrol, it would have been carrying a standard AGM-114 Hellfire, which is an air-to-ground missile that carries a roughly 20-pound warhead with a sheath around it for fragmentation. Uses a proximity fuse as well as a pressure sensor fuse. For the apparent movement explained by parallax, that's possible. I can't really speak to or against that, but it's almost certainly not the bladed missile. Sorry, Patrick.
That was an excellent explanation. So here's a good question that I think people probably also think about. What is the point in the powers that be allowing these guys to tell their part of the story while keeping much of it classified? In terms of the powers that be, if you're saying why elements of legacy program cease witnesses or whistleblowers from telling testimony, that does happen quite a bit. I think for this hearing also, there has been rumors of various witnesses, first-handers that dropped out due to fear of reprisals. I know for a fact that happened in 2024 and 2023. So there are people that are, I guess, stonewalled from actually testifying. I think that the powers that be, if you want to be referencing legacy programs or intelligence communities here, also are hip and wise to the questions that the House, that Congress, that Senate, that basically can be asked towards the witness, knowing that irreparable damage or secrets and dams can't be broken in front of the populace at the time. If you guys have anything else you think here.
I mean, I would say that the point in powers that be allowing these guys to tell part of their story, it's not really that they're allowing people to tell part of their story in some cases. Right. I mean, there are certain things that are limited hangouts. Absolutely. Let's tease some information out to the public to either satisfy them enough that like that ceases the inquiry and we don't get additional regulation, or, you know, other motivations there. But I would say that we're in the information age now, people. We didn't all grow up in it, but we're at the point where you can't really hold a secret for more than a certain amount of time. All those theories about how long you could keep a secret and how big of a conspiracy you could have before it leaked out, those are out the window, because even back in the day before all of the internet stuff existed, it was considered nearly impossible to keep large conspiracies, although that's bullshit. We know that. But nowadays, people have avenues to get things out before they can be stopped. And it's a good thing. So,
what do you think, Kerm? Anything to add?
I mean, you know, you hear a lot, especially from skeptical folks that I talk to, of like, you know, this could all just be a giant psyop, you know, and I think they even asked that as well.
The Yankee Blue nonsense.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's in that vein. But I mean, if you kind of unpack that, you know, what's the purpose of that psychological operation? Is it to rile up the American public? Not necessarily. I think it is to try to signal or saber rattle or otherwise convince our adversaries that we have, you know, some magical stuff behind the vault. There's a very interesting story I wanted to bring up It was like almost a decade ago. There was a story out of like an Iranian news agency about how they were basically the United States government was being controlled by tall white aliens that were at Area 51, which just an insane story. But it was reported on in the Iranian news agency, and outside of like kind of the schizos on the internet, like it was kind of, it's Iran, like no one's gonna believe it. But just like with that story, for example, like, okay, Iran's one of our adversaries. It's one of the countries that like, the Bush elite like want to go blow up and destroy. But they genuinely believe that like the country is controlled by aliens. Like if we're to take the story to its largest extent. So it's like, okay, well, if this is all a psyop, well, our enemies have believed for quite some time that it's like, oh, they've taken it. The psyop's been successul. But it's been successful from that perspective. But yeah, I know. I was like, what? I'm literally trying to explain my piece here. But it's like, look, okay, if that's the psychological operation, then how do you how do you thread the needle of all this stuff that's coming out recently, and the New York Times and the DNI's report and like all this other stuff? Like, even if like our enemies have been convinced, there's no reason why any of this stuff should have happened, because Iran's believed since at least 2013 that the aliens run the government. So it's just, I don't know. There's certain skeptical or skeptic kind of minded avenues that it's just like, it just doesn't really reconcile in my head. And it's, I don't know. Again, I don't have I've never had any classified, classification or worked in government. So I don't really have perspective in that angle. A lot of the stuff is what I read on the internet, but, just the psyop angle, it's like, yeah, I can see, I understand it. And I think that there's data behind that, but I think the story is a lot more complicated than that.
Will you post that article on your Twitter? Because I think,
for sure.
I think everybody wants to see that. That sounds awesome.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And for everybody, I'm CurbDogENT on X. It's a picture of an alien with a cell phone. He's like this.
Check the video description. It's linked in there.
Oh,
so anybody, go follow both of these men. One of the witnesses, when asked if the video of the Hellfire missile scared him, he would have to respond in a skiff. This is Dylan Borland when asked if basically he knew of any non-human technology that could do that to a Hellfire missile. And he said he would have to respond in a skiff. I think that what he was implying here was probably that non-human craft or non-human capabilities can far exceed that of our own best weapons. If you guys also got the same semblance there.
I mean, I got the vibe that if you could answer it in a skiff, the answer would be no. Because I think that if he has to answer outside of a skiff, the answer has to be yes, right? Oh, yes, that's concerning. But
right.
I would say in a skiff, it's possible the answer could be no, because he's already brushed up against maybe evidence of us having a higher level weaponry than that.
That's actually a great point, Rob.
So that's just my thought. Devil's advocate there.
So here's a good question. Would you restructure the hearings to produce better results, or what would you change about the way the hearings currently run? I think these hearings and specifically were well executed and pretty happy with the results. I think from what you guys have said earlier, you feel the same. Do you guys, is that accurate to say you guys feel that you're pleased with the hearings? I know we rate both of these a little bit behind 2023, but are there any overall changes that you guys would extend?
I mean, from my limited understanding of congressional procedure, my understanding is that they were very, very hamstrung by the fact that they're a subcommittee, they're a task force of the committee. Ideally, I would like to see these things played out at the committee level, not the task force level.
Yes.
Except they gave up a bit. So this needs to be done with the actual House Oversight Committee, not the task force on declassification of federal secrets like it currently has. So. And that's why this hearing was smaller, is because it was a task force hearing. It was not a committee hearing like it has been previously.
Yes, and I think in the future as well that eventually this subject needs to be passed up even from House or Senate. Senate has shown previously they're not equipped to deal with this topic. I think the House is likely going to run into the same roadblocks where if push comes to shove that congressmen
aren't going to be willing to stake their political career on this subject. So I think maybe like a DNI level, ODNI level is eventually going to have to take up this topic and pick up the mantle. And I really hope that is what transpires.
I mean, the light or the silver lining to that is that at the very least, the individuals on this task force have a good working relationship with not only the White House but also DNI Gabbard. Take that information for what you will, but if they're going to do something, they at least do have avenues to go do it, whether or not you have faith in that avenue. So.
Right. Yes. And as we saw right after the hearings, Tim Burchett's posting some photos with DNI Gabbard. That was encouraging to see. It's about a longboard.
Yeah.
The one thing I'd change, and this is more on kind of the back end, is the protocol for getting folks into the hearing.
Yeah.
We all had reserved seats. There's been some scuttlebutt that, our friends over at the Night Shift channel, Clint and Xander, they got in line at Kermit. We might have lost him. He turned into a bit of a mosaic here. Well, let's hope his internet smooths out. They got in line from about 4:45 a.m. And they were about the 11th and 12th people in line. Some had been there since midnight, in fact. And at the time to get into the hearing, a well-known group, kind of forced themselves in and took a lot of spots from good people. Like Chris Bledsoe actually was standing right behind Clinton Xander, didn't get in. So that was a little unfortunate to see.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a tough situation. I didn't like that at all. I didn't like the fact that the hearing got moved to a smaller hearing room, because realistically there should have been not only lots of space in there, but there should have been an overflow room for everybody else as well, and there wasn't one.
Yeah.
So that was super unfortunate. I mean, shouts out to our sponsors there who helped us get in. That was a huge blessing, but it was super disappointing to see certain personalities who have failed to really do anything positive for the subject continue to take up space. And by that, I mean certain individuals at NPI, as well as Jaime Malson and his 6 cameramen that he brought in without reserved seats, but somehow got reserved seats for. So
yeah, I mean, so it's kind of out of the bag. The Night Shift crew said it. The NPI crew was the one that swarmed into the hearing room immediately. And at least from where I was sitting, it was my understanding that
they had those seats, though. They had those seats, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, no. From where I was sitting, it was my understanding that, because of course I was sitting behind Matt Brown, that was for guests invited specifically from maybe members of Congress, maybe people who set up the hearings. The first row were guests of witnesses. But sitting right there was
to be back behind with us.
Right. Because these gentlemen were off on the wing by Clinton Xander. It was my understanding that it was for like directly invited guests. And when I got in there, and I was one of the first people in the room, because I walked in with Dan Cleary and some of when the other witnesses had entered an auxiliary room. Jaime Maussan was already sitting in his seat. And I wonder if that was actually his reserved seat, or he just kind of wanted to get there for optics for his 6 camera crew. It's kind of becoming funny now. Dan was talking
towards the latter.
Yeah, I agree. Dan was talking about it a little bit, but Jaime fell asleep throughout the testimonies and was snoring.
No
Dan Cleary
3 times.
Dan Cleary.
I mean, not to rip on him so much, but he's an old guy, and it's I have grandparents. These guys, when they're sitting in a chair for more than an hour, it's like they doze off. But we're talking about the most interesting subject of all time. Right. I would hope you'd have a little bit more attention to it. I get that you're very old and you've been in this game for a long time, but and I don't know.
It was frustrating and unprofessional.
Yeah, there were good people waiting to get in. There was a hellaciously long line. When we pulled up, we kind of pulled up at around 8:30 a.m. just because we didn't have to get in and wait in line, and there were still hundreds of people almost waiting in line.
Yeah,
but the increase in size of the room, and I was also surprised that so many media folks were turned down. I know Clinton Xander from Night Shift applied for media, and the House Oversight Committee said, no, there is only room for accredited House media. But as far as I'm aware, besides the BBC gentleman, you guys were sitting by, and I think CBS got some footage as well, but the way some of the camera filmers work is they actually sit in front of the witnesses, kind of against the wall, filming them. So I didn't see any full media teams. And of course, Matt Laszlo was supposed to be there. I think he got ill. So he unfortunately wasn't able to attend. But I'm confused there. Let's get to this question, because this is always an interesting one, and perhaps it could be a bit pertaining to the hearings, as of course George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell are pretty big on this topic. Ross Coulthart seems convinced that the Tic Tac is Lockheed's. Any idea why that is? I think it's directly because his sources tell him it's Lockheed. I've heard the same. I don't know if you guys have. However, I don't feel comfortable enough to make a proclamation like that without spending like 8 months doing my due diligence to understand more.
So I've heard the same, but I will note that the phrasing is always interesting, right? They say it's Lockheed's. They don't say that it was made by Lockheed. They don't say that that's a Lockheed platform. They say the Tic Tac is Lockheed's, and it's almost always phrased that way. I can't think of a time where it wasn't phrased that way. So I think that there's also some wordsmanship games that are being played there with that statement. It might be Lockheed's, it might be their property temporarily, or it might be a device that they've gotten working again or something like that. Those are possible things, but I'm not sure I even believe that it's Lockheed's. So,
well, recently Ross came out and said that it very well could be a non-human craft Lockheed was attempting to operate with human operators.
Right. I mean, that seems like something they'd be trying to imply due to the looseness of the language to me.
Yeah.
But
Kern, what do you think?
I mean, wasn't it Corbell that like he was talking to Fravor? I think this was on like an interview that he had with him, and he was like, "You were given passage material that said that the Tic Tac that you saw was Lockheed Martin technology," and he uses the specific phrase "passage material," which is like, you know, it's like the Yankee Blue whatever, like it's a fake program that we're passing to you to convince you otherwise. So, excuse me, I think my internet's terrible, but yeah, I keep that in the back pocket, and so it's hard to reconcile, you know, Ross's very direct and very like almost certain reporting, like I know categorically that the Tic Tac is Lockheed Martin.
Yeah,
like I don't know, because now there's a discordance between kind of the two possibilities there. Like it's either passage material or it's definitely Lockheed Martin, and then you know the range of possibilities in between. I don't know.
And I think more investigation needs to be done because, of course, on one side we have Corbell and Knapp's outright dismissal, and on the other side we have Coulthart's proclamation that Tic Tac is Lockheed. So, you know, I don't think any side should be glued onto right now, and it's an interesting question that I think deserves some further acute analysis, especially by the Tic Tac's behavior. We'll begin to wind down and start to wrap it up here. So I just want to get.
Oh man,
I know, dude. We could go on for hours. These gentlemen are fantastic. Yeah. I want to just know more, and I'll keep going through questions for a little bit. But we lost him again.
Dang.
He might have the NSA-B team on him. So I'll wait. Oh, we can hear him.
No, we just lost his video.
Did you turn your video off?
Yeah, you just. No, something happened, man. This is a new setup for me. I apologize. Let me see if I can troubleshoot the background.
They got him, boys. No, he's good. So there have been comments before, and Kermit said this last year, Rob, and I'd like to get your take because Kermit was at the last November 2024 hearings with me, and then these hearings. And one of the things Kermit said I thought was interesting is he relayed a quote by Lester Nair saying that the whole aptitude and attitude of attending the hearings and having actual boots on ground, witnessing this event live is totally different than just observing it on the kind of television or on YouTube. So what was it like for you to watch the previous hearing online versus you actually sitting in the room, your butt in the seat, watching the witnesses walk in, testify, and so forth?
100 million more times engaged. It meant way more to me to be there. And if anything, leaves me wanting to be involved in the process, probably for the rest of my life. it was a transformative experience. I would suggest to anyone in the world that if there is a subject that you feel passionately about, you should feel passionate enough to follow it all the way up to a congressional hearing regarding it, and you should go. Because if you're that passionate, there's nothing that's going to make you feel more so, as if it's even possible, I thought, at the moment. But like, if you're anybody like Tom, Dick, or Harry that's like involved in this space, if you're a content creator, you should have been trying to be there. Like, I don't know what to say to like any YouTuber who makes a living off of this who wasn't there. Like, dude, aren't you doing your job? Like, aren't you supposed to be doing your job? Like, I was there. I don't know. It was a wonderful experience, and I was just awestruck by the level of actual, bipartisanship that I did see on display, but also enthusiasm by the Congress people and the staffers. The staffers seemed engaged. They wanted this.
So we actually were personally walked by one of Burleson's staffers and through some tunnels to get to the hearing room.
Oh, the tunnels, man. That was so
and
cool.
I was a little bit, and I think you posted it on Twitter, right, Kerm?
Yeah.
No,
like
the tunnels?
Yeah, like we're in the tunnels. Was that on
the tunnels?
No, sir,
Okay,
that was
Rob.
Rob. Yeah, that was
Okay,
Rob.
yeah. So we were walked there from tunnels, and I was talking with. So I have a relationship with one of Burleson's staffers. He's the one who secured my reservation and helped get you guys settled too. Brilliant guy, super nice, really engaged with this topic. He was actually at the reception the night before, and he is really done his due diligence on this subject after being exposed to it through Burleson's office. And then that second staffer, the younger gentleman with more curly hair, I was talking to him the whole time too, and he was really receptive and engaged as well. So it is cool to see at least Burleson staffers really engage with this subject. I know that for Burleson as well, this isn't just political theater. Like, I know he takes this extremely seriously, as does Burchett, and I think Luna does too. I think that the one who's taken the most action here is Burleson. I think he's taken a lot of direct action to actually hear from witnesses, to get in skiffs with Arrow and Dave Grush and really kind of put his butt on the line to investigate. But again, I still think that the subject eventually needs to transcend from task force to the entire committee up to OD&I level and not just stay with the House.
I agree.
Let's hear closing remarks from each of you gentlemen. What do you guys have to say before we hit the road?
Just, thanks for having me on. It was a pleasure, as always, to get another chance to get out of the house and go hang out with you. Feels like we're doing this multiple times a year now, and we're probably going to keep that up. But, I just really appreciate being on and getting the chance to talk to your audience. I know from being one of them from early on that you have the smartest viewers on YouTube. So.
Most of the people on this channel are smarter than me, man. All the time. I haven't done a live in a while, but whenever I do a live, people are asking questions that I have just never heard about before and are offering like really interesting questions, really interesting takes, really interesting individuals. What do you say, Kerm?
Yeah, well, I'm hoping my internet doesn't cut out here as I give my monologue, but being at the hearing last year, that was incredible. Gerb, thank you so much for including me in that. I mean, even though I was in the overflow room, like, got to meet a lot of people that I, have internet relationships with on Reddit and Twitter. And so putting a name to a username is, it's super fun. And just great people, like, the types of people that I think we've been able to meet at, DC and Seoul, and Huntsville. It's been one of the greatest, journeys of my life. It's been one of the most fun things, just to be able to be a part of this and do this with you guys. So, I gotta say, I want to believe the truth is out there. And also, like, we got to follow the money. And, I think we're all interested in this thing for the same reasons. And that's inclusive of, even the skeptic minded people, because it does take a certain level of autism to, follow this topic religiously and post manifestos about, even it being a Ginshu missile and the UFO is a balloon. Like, we're all interested in getting to the bottom of this. And, like, there's a lot of name calling and harassment and housewives level drama in this space. But at the very least, like, I very much respect our group, and just kind of like the younger kind of group that's like internet based and just wants to hear the story and wants to, you know, be there for it and also like report on it. And I'm so blessed to be a part of this and, you know, the kind of limited role that I'm in. So yeah,
well, there's a lot of
been great.
There's a lot of young folks that are really talented in this subject, and there's an older guard, and it seems like a lot of the younger folk are really, really prepared to put their butts on the line to investigate this topic. One thing I will say is that I, of course, haven't done a live in a long time. They're actually, to be quite honest, a bit stressful just sitting in the camera alone, talking to a screen for a while. So if you guys would like to see Rob and Kermit more on the channel for some live streams, let me know, because as far as the comments I've seen, as well as talking to you guys, they're great. Some of my best friends in real life. Like, I know these guys in real life. If you guys want them to see them more on some lives and us three chatting about live topics together, and then of course cat offs and fits, if we can pull that off too. I'll fly both of you boys to wherever it needs to be. But I would like to appreciate both of you gentlemen for going on stream or coming on today. Remember, in the channel description, there is Burning Rob and Mr. Kermdog Ent, their Twitter handles. So please give these fellas a follow. They're some of my best friends. I don't call people brilliant a lot of the time, but these guys are super sharp guys. They are smarter than me, and in terms of just finance and overall assessment of this subject, follow them. But we will catch everybody later, and thank you guys again for joining.
Thanks for having us.